It's so great to see you all. My name is Barbara Příhodová, and I'm the curator of PQ Talks. Welcome, welcome. I know there is a lot of going on. Thank you. I know there is a lot of going on, fantastic things during PQ, and there is also a busy social events agenda, right? So we appreciate you coming this morning and to see all of your faces. I'm very excited about today. We have a wonderful program coming up. When we were planning the PQ Talks, and of course we're here to talk about performance design and its newest developments and its pressing issues, we knew we have to talk about sustainability and ecology, but we also knew we needed to get some help. And we're very fortunate because we got the best help we could get. Tania Baer is here. She has graciously accepted our invitation to prepare a full day on ecoscenography conversations. Tania Baer, of course, is the leading expert in ecoscenography, researcher, designer, educator herself. She has brought another wonderful ecocenographer, Marianne Lavoie, and the two of them will facilitate the day. So we're going to have 3 panels designed by them, starting with introduction to ecocenography. And we also have a wonderful panel by EcoStage here that came from the call. So I'm very excited about today again. Welcome. And please join me giving warm welcome to Tania Baer and Marianne Lavoie.
Hi everybody, so excited to be here today and talk all about ecoscenography. So it's a really packed crowd. It's quite daunting. So we are super proud to be showcasing a number of ecoscenographers here today and talk a bit about the concepts of ecoscenography. Marianne is going to start giving a bit of an introduction to the work that she does at Ecosceno, and then I'll give my presentation on an introduction to ecoscenography.
Thank you, Tania. Thank you, PQ, for having me, for having Ecosceno for this first PQ talk on ecoscenography. So we're thrilled to see where the conversation will lead us today. So just as an introduction, we thought it'd be great if I just explain what is Ecosceno, which is the organization where I work at. So my colleague Julie and I have prepared a short video just to put you in context of what it is that we do in terms of ecoscenography. Right. So Ecosceno was founded in 2019. It is a non-profit based in Montreal, Canada. Montreal is also known as Tiohtià:ke by the Mohawk Nation, who are the custodians of the lands and waters where the city is located. So for over 3 years, I've been part of the Ecosceno team, serving as an eco-design consultant and trainer. Our mission at Ecosceno is to support the socio-ecological transition of the artistic community by reducing the environmental impact of cultural production. And to fulfill our mission, we have 2 main areas of activity. So the first one is a warehouse where we retrieve and distribute secondhand materials. We have set pieces, props, fabric that are all reclaimed and that we redistribute to the cultural community. Since Montreal's cultural ecosystem operate in a linear manner, we deemed it crucial to establish a facility where reclaimed materials from the cultural sector can transit by for circulation. And that is a place you're seeing on screen right now. That said, I do have to mention that we had to suspend our activities regarding this facility. However, I'm pleased to announce that we received the necessary funding to reopen, and we're anticipating a reopening of the facility by the end of the year. So that's the first thing that we do and what we're mostly known for. But the second main area of activity that we do is the sharing of ecoscenography knowledge and resources with our community. Ecoscenography places great emphasis on the design phase. It is the moment where 80% of the environmental impact is determined. Thus, it's essential for us to rethink the conception process. So the objective that we have is to support scenographers in designing resources rather than producing waste. Therefore, Ecosceno is actively developing an eco-scenography teaching program in Canada. The program is meant for professionals, teachers, and students as well. We offer a general class covering eco-scenography principles, as well as specialized workshops such as mechanical assembly, sustainable costume design, non-toxic finishing products, and so on. I will have the opportunity to go deeper into that subject later today for the panel on teaching eco-scenography. But the work that I personally do at Ecosceno, and the reason why I'm here with you today, is eco-scenography consultancy. This service involves my colleagues and I working as consultant on plays or museum exhibition. Oh, the video stopped. Well, I can also talk with chairs in the background, but I really wanted you to see the images of the consultancy. I'll go on, and I'm sure it'll be figured out. So we do eco-scenography consultancy, and that's when my colleagues and I, we really work with theater and museum exhibition as an added member to the production, if you may. So we assist the production team in integrating eco-scenography habits at every step of the project. So we're there from preliminary design to until after strike, accompanying the production teams. So we act as an additional resource, offering guidance to find customized solutions that align with each artistic project. This involves, for instance, actively participating in production meetings, conducting research on new innovative materials, and testing innovative products. You will see a few examples of how we applied eco-scenography principles on production that we worked with. As you'll see, we both work within more traditional eco-scenography and expanded eco-scenography. So the first example that I want to talk to you about is Showtime. So this is a play that was held at Giuseppe Theatre in Montreal. This was a grand traditional set that required a lot of materials. It was designed by Odile Gamache. And despite its size, we were a bit scared at first, so much material, such a big traditional set. It's been a very circular scenography. What I mean by that is that most of the materials on the show were reclaimed material, and the vast majority of them were reused after the show. So it was all repurposed, and what has helped this result is careful planning ahead of time for the sharing of resources, but also the standardization of the set and the modularity of the set. For the costumes, we had Eleni Wing, who did a lot of upcycling as well. So she took existing garments and transformed them into extravagant costume. So everything was really secondhand and reused. The next show, I think it's already on screen, Clandestine. So this case study was at CTD Theatre. Scenographer was Anne-Sophie Gaudet. And what was very special for us about this show is the flexible concept. So the scenographer kept the concept flexible, which allowed us to use a lot of existing materials and even get inspired by that material to use it. It also allowed us to play with new innovative material that we had never tried before. So you saw the paper wall before that replaced a huge, heavy plywood structure, and we used these innovative materials instead. The costume was also a lot of secondhand and certified label costume as well. The last example is Tree Giant from Mirari. This was a circus show, and it was a very important project for us. So for the first time with this show, we tried to go beyond just reducing the environmental impact, and instead we tried to amplify positive long-term impact for the show for the community. So for instance, designer Xavier Marie was willing to work with real trees for the show that were replanted right after the show in a nearby park. Also, the pots to hold the trees were designed in a way to be given to an organization that stays within the same park where the show was held. And this will be doing will be used as vegetable gardens to nourish the community for a long-term legacy. So that was a very special show for us. And also the fake rocks that you saw were reused styrofoam, don't worry. So the designer only used what already was existing to use nothing brand new for materials. So that's what we do mostly. We also do, at the end of production, we do postmortem, my team and I. And the postmortem is really meant to present to the entire team the process that they've done, the strategies that they've used toward ecoscenography. So it's a great moment to give this great portrayal and mostly to celebrate the success, but also the mistakes, because that's where we learn the most. So we developed a few tools to be able to show the process of the teams that we work with, and it's a great celebration. So we understand ecoscenography as a creative and evolving process. We think it can be adapted to each production's need. Hence, it is important to account the different context of each Project in our work. Right, thank you. Thank you. So now, let's put the spotlight on Tanya Baer, who developed the concept of ecoscenography. So Tanya's prepared a thorough presentation on the notion of ecoscenography. This will be followed by a Q&A with you guys. So if you want to prepare questions in your head during Tanya's presentation, feel free to do so. So Tanya, if you want to take up the stage.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much, Marianne. That Ecosceno is an innovator and world leader in ecoscenography, and I hope that just shows you what is possible across a range of different ways in which we make theatre. And Ecosceno really shows how it's done, you know, the whole process of doing that. So I hope that we can see more Ecosceno work happening all over the world. And I think we will, in the next 10 years, really see these kind of projects and businesses starting to flourish. So I'm going to give you a bit of an introduction to ecoscenography, and really a lot of this has come from my book, which was published in 2021. But I thought I should start by giving you a bit more information about myself. So I call myself an ecological designer and a community artist. I use those words really deliberately in the way in which I talk about community, ecology, being an artist and being a designer. So quite intersectional. And I'm an educator and a researcher as well. And my current main job is being a senior lecturer in interior design at the Queensland College of Art at Griffith University. And I'm situated in an art and design school, so not in a theatre school. So that's also interesting in itself. Let's make sure this is going to... No? Yep. And I'm also the co-director of the Performance and Ecology Research Lab, which just launched in March this year. This is an absolute dream come true for me. It's really about forefronting and furthering climate justice across all areas of the performing arts, and specifically working within the Australian context. So it's really important for me to also acknowledge where I am situated when I work and practice and do my teaching, and that is on the Yagara and Turrbal lands. And I want to acknowledge that I'm coming from a colonised country, a country of many countries, many natures, and many nations and many cultures. And I think we as Australian need to be proud of the fact that we have the oldest continuing culture in the world, built on 65,000 years of continuing culture, and also environmental custodianship. And Australia is and was and is Aboriginal land. So I think that we have a lot to consider, taking Indigenous perspectives into the work that we do. There's so much there to still learn. The idea that the ecological is cultural is just one of those. So I work very much in the realm of of what we call expanded scenography, and I describe expanded scenography as stage design that has left the building and starts to intersect with daily life. And I've been working in that context for about 10 years now. And I'm really interested in working with place, in community, and activating social ecological connection in the kind of work that I do. But I think it's really important to acknowledge that I started very much in traditional theatre, and I trained very much as a set and costume designer over 20 years ago. And so obviously I've worked as a theatre designer in a traditional context as well, in those expanded forms. So my transition to an ecological focus started about 10 years ago, and it really was about aligning my personal values with my practice. I found that while I was trying to be a good citizen, eco-citizen in my daily life, when I walked into the theatre, somehow theatre gave me a license to do the things that I would not do at home, and this became increasingly uncomfortable. As someone who's always been passionate about social ecological issues already as a very young age, I just couldn't. I knew that either I needed to start thinking about sustainability in my practice, or I had to leave the industry. So I kind of got to that crunch point about 10 years ago. And of course, we know now that these things are becoming more and more conscious. In Australia, we are at the front lines of the climate crisis. It's really part of our lived reality. And I know that many of you also come from countries where this is happening. And this is happening right now. So for me, we're living in times where the impossible things happen. So it's a hard thing to swallow. But I think I take a lot of solace in knowing that the solutions are already out there. You know, we can look around, we can see what Ecosceno has done, but we can also look more broadly to architecture and other design industries. And it's all really possible. And I think in the performing arts, we're just coming to this point where we're starting to fully grasp what an environmentally, socially sustainable practice means for us, and that's an exciting time. Like, we can set the agenda. We can decide what we want that to look like. And I think that in this age of environmental awareness, we need a new philosophy for theatre production that promotes holistic, ecological, interconnected ways of working. This is something that is an opportunity rather than a constraint. And so the work that I do and what's outlined in my book is really, it's about examining a new philosophy for theatre production in an age of increasing environmental fragility. And I think we need a philosophy behind our practices, and that's what, for me, in my work as an academic, as well as a practitioner, I call myself a pracademic because I kind of cross those two worlds all the time in the work that I do, is to really think about what that means from a philosophical standpoint, from an ecological framework, those underpinnings around our practices. And so for me, the last 10 years since I started my PhD has really been about conceptualising how an ecological ethic can be incorporated into theatre practice. What does it mean to be an ecological designer? And when I first started my work, my research in 2012, there wasn't a lot happening at the time, and I remember having conversations with a lot of people in the industry. And these are the kinds of things that people said, about when I mentioned sustainable design. They talked about it as this thing that would be a limitation on our practices and on our aesthetics. And even I heard people say things like theatre and sustainability don't mix. Now, I think 10 years later, we moved on from there, and that's really exciting, but there are still those perceptions to overcome. And it's not surprising that we feel this way, that we feel the kind of sense that, what is this going to mean for the way in which I practice? What does that mean for the aesthetics? Is that we tend to see sustainability as a problem rather than an opportunity. And this glass half empty approach is a real problem because we are looking at the world through a lens of scarcity rather than opportunity, right? So we need to think, it's so important to think from a place of abundance rather than scarcity. Sustainability should be rebranded as thrivability. We should be thinking from a place of abundance. If you think from a place of abundance in everything, not just scenography, everything changes. Suddenly there's room for everyone, you know, to be part of the conversation. And that's really important if we're going to, you know, move forward in this direction. So ecoscenography, at the heart of it, it's about embracing opportunities of ecological design for performance. It's about bringing performance design in an increased awareness of global issues, broader ecological conditions. It's about interweaving the ecological, the social, and the cultural. And it's also still about creating evocative spatial experiences, as we saw Marianne show us with Ecosceno. And of course, it is about mitigating waste and impact, but it's also about creating positive outcomes. It's about the opportunity to give back. It's about thinking beyond the 3 Rs into something that is much more inspiring. And I'm not so interested in what ecoscenography is, how it can be defined, but I'm more interested in what it does. I'm interested in the how of ecoscenography, how it affects our ways of thinking and doing within and beyond the performing arts. And from a philosophical standpoint, ecoscenography takes lots of resources and lots of thinkings that are very intersectional. You know, these are some of the readings that have been really important to me in my conceptualization of ecoscenography. But ultimately what this means is, you know, if I was to sum up the philosophical standpoint of ecoscenography, it's about seeing the world as a social ecological system, one that merges the biological, mental, social, and cultural. It's about understanding that the human and the non-human are inextricably entangled across bodies, substances, and ecosystems. It's about understanding that there is no such thing as a way, that our practices have consequences, and the material self cannot disentangle itself from the transcorporal networks between local and global bodies and substances, flows, and forces. And simply put, waste is a failure of the imagination. And when we think about waste as a failure of the imagination, and you are also creative people in the room, then again, the opportunities come up. We also need to think about our materials, think about how all non-human things are also vital, vibrant, and alive. They possess agency. We know that plastic has consequences, right? It has an effect on the way in which we practice on our world around us. And if we are to really embrace ecoscenography, we have to think about the word reciprocity, the word custodianship, and we need to start moving with an open heart and open mind into this future. All right, so what does that mean for us as designers? I think there's always a bit of a kind of tussle with this kind of conflict of the ego and the eco, right? So one of the things that we have to think about is how can we be more eco? And that's something I always am asking myself, like, don't think ego, think eco. It's like this kind of little mantra that goes on in the back of my mind. But ecoscenography is really about challenging that modern kind of prevailing individualist focus, right, that's on the self, and starting to think about how do we make work that is more conscious and connected to the environmental, social, cultural systems of which we are part. This is fundamentally about expanding aesthetics. We have currently, I would argue, a very limited understanding of aesthetics in our field, a visual spatial understanding of aesthetics, the phenomenological, the embodied approach to how we experience performance, how we design spaces that are beautiful and exciting. But for me, it's like, well, what happens if we expand that out to ecological and evolutionary aesthetics? And one way to think about that is, how can something be considered beautiful if it degrades living systems? And once you get that in your head, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. The way in which you view something is through this lens. And that, again, is one of those things that starts to change everything. All right, so just to kind of break things up a bit, I'm going to do this activity. I'm going to invite Marianne to come up on stage and help me do this. So many of you will not know this, but I used to, is everything okay? I used to be a dancer. I suppose I still am a dancer. But my background is my first love was dance, and it's through dance and spatial awareness that I came into scenography. And so I'm always like thinking about how can I have a more embodied approach to how I think about philosophy, and how can I embody these ideas. So I'm going to do an exercise with everybody, and if you are feeling up to it, I'd love you to stand up to do this. And it's a good opportunity to just like stand up, shake yourself out a little bit. Do you want to just stand over here? Yeah. Okay, so great, everybody, yay. So there's this idea that there's this integral theorist called Sean Esbjørn who is one of my influences. He talks a lot about this idea of an expanded awareness, identity expansion. And he talks about this evolution from me to all beings, all the world. And it's a beautiful idea, and again, it's this thing that just opens everything up. So in order to embody this, I would like you to take your hands. I've only got one hand at the moment, but Marianne's going to show you. Put your hands in front of your face. Please keep your eyes open. This is an important part of the awareness training. And I'm just going to talk through what Sean Esbjørn talks about in terms of this. So he talks about this transition from me. And where we are now is what we might call the egocentric. The egocentric worldview is very much us within ourselves. Yep. So that's probably what you're feeling right now as you're looking into your hands, this sense of your own awareness. I would like you now to move your hands about 5 centimeters from your face. So that's, we get now to the widening of identity to my group. And Esbjørn talks about this as being the ethnocentric. Let's move it out a little bit more, another 5 centimeters. You'll notice now that you can see more, that you can feel your collaborators, your community around you. And this is called my country, the socio-centric. As we move our hands further forward, we get to this notion of the world-centric, all of us. Let's keep moving our hands forward. Let's open our hands to all beings, the planet-centric. And then open that wide, like you're giving the world a hug. And we're basically into this sense of all of reality, which we call the cosmocentric. So let's just have this go of egocentric to cosmocentric. Just do it a few times, and it feels different. So if we're embodying this kind of notion, it's a really good feeling, and you get a nice stretch, which is a good thing to do in the mornings. So that's the Ecoscenography dance. So there you go. So that's the idea of identity expansion, is this notion of creative expansion, widening in identity that expands from the individual practitioner to acknowledging the multiple interconnectedness across communities and environments in the making of the work that we do. And this is all about combining ecological thinking with creativity. It's about an eco-creative practice, and that's where the innovation lies. So for me, my concept of ecoscenography has been very much inspired by nature and by living systems, and I'm very, very lucky because I'm married to an ecologist who takes me out into nature a lot and explains living systems to me a lot. And some of my best ecoscenographic experiences have been going into the Australian bush at night and visiting the glowworms, which I have to say is the best ecoscenographic lighting design that I've ever seen. And also discovering all the different animals that come out at night. So for me, it's like, how can I look at nature and get inspired by the way nature does things as a framework for ecoscenography? And for me, that's what we call biomimetic, right? Biomimicry is about drawing inspiration from 3.8 billion years of evolution. So nature knows what it's doing. You know, we have a lot to learn from how nature does things. So we're basically thinking about, for me, how we're moving from this linear to this circular way of doing things. And if we're inspired by living systems, we can see very quickly that there's no such thing as waste in nature. That living systems do not value one stage of being over another. Instead, it is part of a process of further becoming, in which every part of the journey is crucial and valued. And so for me, it's like, how can we rethink theatre from that perspective? How can we reframe theatre production to also not only acknowledge the making of our practices, but the unmaking, right? At the moment, we don't value unmaking, but unmaking our practices can also be an exciting discovery. And so for me, it's like thinking about this as what we call in German a Gesamtkunstwerk, which basically means a holistic artwork. Where we look at pre-production and opening night, or the performance season and the post-production, as a total artwork. And this is reframed through the 3 C's of ecoscenography: co-creation, celebration, and circulation. From the 3 P's to the 3 C's. So just to go through that a little bit. So co-creation is really about starting with where we are here now as a point of inspiration. So taking a place-based approach, being open to local and serendipitous opportunities, being relational, understanding what is available to you as part of your concept that you're developing. And it's really interesting because I think the way that I was trained as a stage designer was very much through this lens of, you get a play, and then you've got to come up with your own preconceived idea, like you've got to kind of come up with an idea that is actually in many ways devoid of place and devoid of the resources that are around you. So this kind of unpacks a lot of that. And then the other thing is, I think we need to be more community integrated. We need to work more with other designers, with other organisations, with the resources that communities have for us. And this is about borrowing and sharing resources and engaging audiences in the making of the work that we do. And there's lots of really fantastic examples of this that some of you will already know really well, and Ecosceno has been doing this as well. But I think one of the famous examples that I like to bring up all the time is Donya Worley's work, because she was a real eco-trailblazer. She was one of the first designers that was doing this, and she was doing this on Broadway. And I think that if you can do this on Broadway, you can do this anywhere. And she works a lot with reclaimed materials. She visits New York junkyards, and everything that you see there is reclaimed. And she talks about this relationship with material. She talks about the way that she co-creates with the materials. She lets the materials inform her practice. She doesn't have too many ideas first before she goes in and works with the material. She has an openness in the way she does things. And she talks about the way that she wrestles with that sometimes. That collaboration with material is not always easy. And then Andrea Carr's work, who's just sitting over here, and she'll be talking a lot in the next panel, has also showcased how you can take waste from festivals and turn it into extraordinary artworks. And Ruth Springer is another UK designer that talks a lot about her site-specific theatre experience as being one that is really instrumental to helping her go into the ecoscenography path. There's all this innovation happening also in the use of biomaterials, and I think we're going to see a surge in work in this space, and this is where it gets quite experimental. And Annika Flo's work was literally working with mushroom as a co-collaborator in her scenographic experiences. Ingvild Fossheim has been exploring this in a costume scenario, looking at microbial SCOBY and things like that, and seeing what that does, what happens when you work with those biomaterials on bodies specifically, and how does that change the whole costume design experience and the performative experience. And then in terms of co-creating with communities, there's been examples where designers have worked with the community to actually build the set designs. And this is a really great example from Australia, where bamboo workshops were conducted and they were free and everybody could learn how to work with bamboo. And then that also helped to create the production. In my own work, I see co-creation as something that happens where I can in the public space. So I don't just showcase the final design, I actually co-create with communities in public spaces. I show the making. I think it's really important that we consider how we might also celebrate the making of the work that we do, showcase that as well. The amount of labour that goes into the work that we do is something that's often hidden, and I don't know why it needs to be. Celebration, the best stage. Everyone knows this so well, and this is why we do what we do, right? That's what we live for, to see our designs, to see our performances on stage with an audience engaging with it. But in the context of ecoscenography, the performance season is not an endpoint, but seen as a vibrant and highly visible midpoint. The stage is seen as a vital platform, both literally and metaphorically, for meaningful communion, connection, and cross-pollination of culture and ideas. And it's using the stage as a platform to showcase sustainability. I think that's where, again, we have a little microcosm in theatre to explore this and to test out new materials where other design disciplines may not be able to do that. The ephemerality of theatre can give us the license to do that. In my own work, I have always worked very intersectionally. So I'm equally passionate about social justice as I am about environmental justice, and I often am working with communities that might have the least access to nature or to opportunities to go to theatre. And this is a work that I did with Polyglot Theatre and Oily Cart, which is for children with profound and multiple disabilities, and children that will never really get to go outside into the bush, which makes me very sad. So the idea was to bring the bush experience indoors in a place that was safe for them to experience. So we had about 1,000 plants that we brought in to the space that we borrowed with a local nursery, and the idea was to recreate the bush at night, the Australian bush at night, to really create that ecological encounter. We can see also how materials can be showcased and celebrated. In this example, bamboo is an incredible work for circus, where the whole way of making circus and doing circus was completely changed because of the material. And for me, the bamboo is, it's really showcases in this work the flexibility and strength of that material. Mycelium, again, a great resource that I would love to tap into more about how we can use mycelium, for example, instead of styrofoam, to create these kind of evocative spaces. And then in terms of, if we're talking about lighting design and sound design, there's been a lot of innovation here in renewable technology and actually showcasing and celebrating that renewable technology on stage. So instead of it being behind the scenes, actually bringing the actors out to cycle on stage to show how that electricity that we're watching is being generated. And that's really interesting dramaturgically as well. Circulation is probably the hardest because we haven't spent enough time thinking about circulation in our work. And this is about taking the afterlife of theatre materials into consideration in the design and the construction processes. It's about rethinking the potential of our refuse as a valuable resource. How might we make something valuable elsewhere? And it's advocating again for a sharing of culture in terms of the way that we use the tools and the resources, and we share that within our networks. So Marie-Renée is a designer from Quebec who I think is a champion in this space. She is one of the original eco-scenographers, and her work is extraordinary, both visually and ecologically. And she's always collaborating with different stakeholders, with people who are suppliers, and generating relationships to make her designs as sustainable as possible. But she talks about this as something that she loves to do. It makes her happy. And this thing, as she says, I'm also really animated by the idea of making matter circulate, to allow it to become something else, to have several lives, several possibilities. This is something I take into account from the very beginning of the creative process, thinking about the ephemeral uses, but often more than not, I think about sustainable alternatives to facilitate re-employment. The truth is, I'm a matter lover. I find it touching to see it circulate and meet several audiences and participate in bringing meaning from all angles. And Janne Robberstad is a Norwegian designer that also, it's interesting, her work, you think, oh, she's using styrofoam, which is an unsustainable material, which is true. But she's working in a closed loop cycle. So the idea is that she's borrowing these fish crates, these styrofoam fish crates from the local salmon factory, using them from her show and then returning them. So it's all happening in-house. And the relationships that she builds by touching base with the salmon factory, and then these connections also become new audiences. So if you think about this notion of sharing and activating resources and connections, this can also activate new audiences as well. We've seen set designs turned into biodiversity tools, so the list is endless of what we can do. I think we still haven't explored enough about the circulation phase. And in my own work, I'm always thinking about the 3 Cs, but I suppose this project where I did an installation from reclaimed salami netting and then knitted it into wearable art is probably a good example of that. And for me, it was kind of bringing a sense of humour to it as well. I didn't know that this material was salami netting initially, and then it became very funny when we started making this wearable art that could be auctioned off for charity, and sort of reclaiming the salami netting experience in the body. And then what I'm working on at the moment, so When the World Turns is the production that I had just recently done with Polyglot Theatre in Oily Cart. And we're looking at new touring models as well here, because this is a co-production with the UK and Australia. And we're thinking about how it's not the objects that circulate, actually it's the ideas. We're thinking about an idea of design ingredients that gets transferred. And for me, it's about also letting go at that kind of sense of control as a designer. So I'm working with Andrea Carr, who's just sitting here in the first row. And Andrea Carr is reinterpreting the design and making it also very place-based in terms of the UK context. So there is different models that we can explore in terms of how we tour our work. Okay, so all of this, the 3 Cs, this is not something that I came up with very easily. I would say that it took me about 8 years to come up with the 3 Cs. And really where it's come from, I really wanted a simple way of making eco-scenography accessible, something that we could just have in our heads, as a way of reminding ourselves. And the 3 Cs really came from the Living Stage project, which is this project that I've been doing over the last 10 years. It was one of my fundamental PhD projects. And it's all about transforming urban spaces into accessible, equitable, and thriving ecological social gathering spaces. And the Living Stage works like this. We grow the stage with the local community. We invite the community to come and perform in the space. and then we eat the stage. And it's all about making sustainability fun and engaging and accessible to everyone. It's a lot of fun. So at the end of the performance life, the living stage is consumed by the community, physical structures become garden beds and community spaces, and the plants become food, and waste becomes compost. So you can see there that the 3 C's are embedded in the living stage, but I had to do the living stage to kind of work that out. We've done living stages all over the world, and they're always specific to site and community, which means that no living stage is ever the same, and that's the beauty of the project. It's basically what keeps me wanting to do it. And I think this is important because what the living stage was really about for me was about how can we create designs that not only enrich our audience but our community and environment as well. This is the question that I posed myself when I started my PhD practice, and the living stage was a kind of answer to that. Okay, so just to sum up about ecoscenography, I hope that ecoscenography opens up tightly held assumptions of how we make theatre, welcomes new ways of exploring and expanding our relationship with materials, sites and communities through our practice. And I really want to fully acknowledge that ecoscenography is not the only way, it is one way. And more investigation is needed for its application to a diversity of theatre context. And I invite you to come on the journey with me and explore your own ecoscenography way of doing things, and talk to me about it and tell me how you're doing it, because I think there's so much that we need to learn in this space and share. Okay, so again, with shifting in ecoscenography, for me, the ultimate game is to shift from sustainability to thrivability, and you can see this kind of diagram there that really talks about, there's thinking beyond recycling, mitigating waste and impact, and thinking about regeneration, because that's ultimately where we need to head to in this world. We can't just be less bad, we actually really have to contribute to our ecosystems and our communities. That is our legacy as performance designers, as theatre makers. I take solace in this journey from transitions theory, which is all about radical ideas not rushed, that it will take time. And it starts with the first single foot in front of the other to start to make a conscious decision to change the way we practice, one step at a time. And so my provocation for the whole day really is, can the coming decades be framed as a time of potential? One where theatre artists rise to the challenge of what it means to bring an ecological perspective into their work, not because they are forced to, but because they embrace the transformative potential that it brings. And we're already seeing this happen, and that's very exciting. And I look forward to seeing more action around the world on this topic. Okay, so I'm going to conclude with a quote from my esteemed colleague, Dr. Rachel Hunn, who is an absolute inspiration in this field. And this is a provocation. She says, "To conclude and energise, I leave with a message to future theatre and performance makers. Do not make theatre like we did. You live in a new ecology, unabashed freedom of creativity, of resources, material and travel is historic. Thrive within an ecological limit. Make theatre like you can." Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Tanya, for this insightful and very generous presentation on ecoscenography. I learned a lot of things as well, so I'm sure it was very insightful for all of us. So we just want to take a moment to sit with you and ask you a few questions, and then after we'll bring it to the audience. But the first question I have for you today is, since I know there's a lot of students with us in the room today, so I was wondering, what would be your advice for someone who wants to start and embark on the ecoscenography journey? So what's a good first step to start this practice?
So we're talking about I think the easiest place to start is probably in the co-creation process. So for me, ecoscenography starts with where we are here now within place. And unfortunately, theatre traditionally has moved away from place. We, kind of come up with these preconceived ideas that are not rooted in the resources that we have available to us, to the possibilities of what's around us. So that would be my first step. Look at what's around you. What resources do you have in your theatre departments, in your communities? Be open, be like a magpie scenographer, like kind of keeping out an idea like that. To me, that way of being is really fun, because then I see, ooh, what's that? Oh, I'm always looking. Things that I find on the side of the road, I'm always looking for ideas. And I think my advice would be, don't be too held. Like, you might read, let's say you get a script or a play and you're like, oh, I can really see what kind of environment I want to create, the kind of vibe. That's great. That's still absolutely one of the first steps that we do in terms of how we respond to a play or a text, but then stay a little bit open. Mm-hmm. So don't have all the decisions made up. Go out there, see what's around you, and then you can come back and I will guarantee your design will be better, because what's out there is way beyond, well, at least for me, what I've got in my little head. Mm-hmm. It's, I got into theatre because I wanted to collaborate. That was really important to me, to not be just a visual artist that works in a studio. I really thrive in collaboration. So for me, it's a kind of collaboration with community. If we think of the community, the resources that are around, talking to people, allowing people to inform you. I make connections with people I wouldn't normally make connections to, mm-hmm. because I'm out there looking for opportunities. It really changes the way you work. But it's so much more fun and so much more rewarding, and you make new friends and new community connections and new audiences from it as well.
Mm-hmm. So allowing flexibility and serendipity throughout the entire creative process. Great, thank you. Next question I have for you is that in your book, you state how radical ideas cannot be rushed. So systemic change takes time. However, the current system that we are in is not particularly ecoscenography friendly, let's say. For instance, we deal with tight schedules, productivity, high expectations, even the salaries are more often than not pretty typical of a mechanical system, as you named it. And since ecoscenography is about the well-being and the care of ourselves and our community, I'm wondering, how can we change the mechanistic system that we are in without putting too much pressure on our shoulders and the shoulder of our team?
That's such a good question, and I think it's one that a lot of people would be thinking about too. So I think it's really important that we don't try to be perfect, and actually there's no such thing as perfection anyway, but I think there's this sense of, okay, I'm going to be sustainable, and therefore everything has to be sustainable and I have to be perfect. And we are still all really learning how to do that within a mechanistic framework, a world that doesn't work in a circular way. Majority. So how we have to celebrate the small wins. It's about one step forward, 2 steps forward, it might be 1 step back. Those failures that you have, those sustainable failures, if we want to call them, they're really good learning moments. Like for me, my biggest learning curves have been the failures, where I'm like, oh my God, why did I make that decision? I just completely forgot. I didn't realise I made a decision and did not think about it, and it hurts, but they're really good lessons. And so it's okay. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to struggle as you walk forward, and celebrate the wins. It's so important to celebrate the wins. We can't move ourselves forward if we don't celebrate them, and work together with your team The well-being of the planet also relies on our own personal well-being. It's all interconnected. And so that also means that the way in which we work in theatre also needs to be interrogated so that we also manage and look after ourselves within that. That's also part of the sustainability conversation. There are no easy answers. There are no 10-step plans. Every context is so different. For me, the Ecoscenography framework is a framework that I hope can exist in any context, but it's not telling you how to be sustainable, what materials to use, because that's so specific to place. It's so specific to everyone, to different cultures, different environments. What is sustainable one place is not necessarily sustainable in another, and I think that's really, really important. It's very intersectional, and I think we need to talk more about sustainability as an intersectional way of thinking. It's social, ecological, and those things have to be part of the same conversation. It's just for too long, sustainability has been this environmental thing, and often at the cost of the social. It's all interrelated.
Right. So it's more of a process than an end goal. You mentioned before when we were talking that there's a good first step is to have a few non-negotiable, for instance.
That's a really good point. Yeah, so I think what I discovered early on is that I had some non-negotiables. And I think it's really good to think about what are my non-negotiables? What are the things for me that I won't do? Right? In this imperfect world, I have those non-negotiables. And that's just the way it goes. But I think that can be, and that will be different for everyone.
What's your non-negotiable?
Okay, there's a few, but spray paint.
Okay.
Spray paint. Yeah. And that's often a personal thing too, because spray paint is one of those things that you can smell its unsustainability. It's so potent. You can smell it. It's like you don't even have to do a life cycle assessment on it. It's like it's unsustainable. It's toxic to us, and if it's toxic to us, it's also toxic to the environment. It's pretty straightforward. That's probably going to be my one non-negotiable. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I think mine would be styrofoam.
Styrofoam, yeah. Fair.
Yeah, starting with a non-negotiable is a good first step. So being kind to oneself, indulgent in the process, and taking one step at a time would be your advice. Thank you. We want to bring it to the room now because I am sure you have plenty of questions. We have 2 mics, I believe, circulating. One here, one there, so if you just want to raise your hand if you have a question, and our team will get to you with the microphone. I have more questions for Tanya, but I know Tanya already. Oh, a hand there. Great, just right there on your right.
Can you just introduce yourself and maybe which country you're from, or if you're a student or an educator or designer?
Hello.
Oh.
Does it work? Yes.
Yeah.
Hello, my name is Barbara. I'm from Prague. I originally don't... my background is not in artistic. I'm more in academic. I did environmental economics, and my PhD was in environmental plant production. And I must say that since I started thinking that direction, I don't have a question, I just have to praise you for what you're doing, because since I've started to wonder that direction, I feel that for instance, the approach and the circulation approach has been launched back in the 80s, start 90s. In European Union, it has been widely spoke maybe around 2010. And there is still a long reaction time in a lot of areas to bring that approach to the practice. And for instance, last year, we've been writing artistic project this time, and we've been trying to fish out the inspiration on sustainable theater. And there was so rare occasions that we could see it, very rare in a local area. And I want to say that it's amazing to bring these examples and bring these talks into discussion and discourse now. So thank you for that. It was just a remark, and I thought to open the discussion that way.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
We have a few hands
More
in the
hands.
back.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Josie. I am a student studying directing and dramaturgy at DePaul University in Chicago in the United States. And my question is, how can you combine ecoscenography in a devised process where the design is often coming after the narrative is being created? I just want to hear your thoughts about that.
So working in a devised context normally allows the designer to be in the same room as the director and the dramaturg and the performers at the same time, right? That's the best, I mean, that's the easiest way to work, because the horizontalization of that cohort is already sort of starting, we're all starting, you know, you're all starting on the same page. So that means you can really start from ground, you know, from the ground up, I suppose. Again, I would go back to place. Like, it doesn't matter what you're talking about, whether it's an ecological issue or not. Everything starts with place. I don't know if you saw the Indigenous panel yesterday, but like that's so, from Indigenous knowledge systems perspective, it's so crucial. Nothing begins without place. And if we start with where we are here now, you can think about that in so many ways. It's not just about the materials and the resources, but also the communities, the context. Where are we? What do we feel about here and now? How do we open up? Go into out of the rehearsal room into nature. Feel inspired. Even urban nature doesn't have to be the bush. It can be urban nature. Find a way to connect with place, and the rest will follow. That's my thing. Let the designer be part of that process, and to feel, you know, pull resources from the place with you. But the storytelling can also happen there as well. I mean, that's great. If it's in devised theatre, then so much is more open, because you don't have the text there to, you know, necessarily to instigate what has to happen. I don't know if that's answered enough. Actually, is there anything that you would say?
Well, in terms of inspiration at first hand, one thing that we try to do at Ecosceno, because sometimes we're in black boxes, and it's hard to connect to the site, and it's not what we usually do. So sometimes it's about finding, well, how can the narrative inform the ecoscenography? So again, so as you said, like, can the play, for instance, Clandestine, that was on the video before, was a show about women, so everything was given back to women's shelter. So can the narrative inform the play? Can the values of the team, you know, common shared values, the director inform the play? Can the institution's value can inform the ecoscenography? So sometimes it's about finding the context, but context can be so many different things. And somewhere in there's an answer for ecoscenography.
Yeah, I think somebody who's going to be on our panel, actually on the teaching panel, Miko, talks about thinking outside the black box, and I thought that was quite nice. Yeah.
We have a few more hands over there. Oh, one at the end, at the back.
Hi, hello. Hi from the back. My name is Summer. I'm from New York, and I'm also an educator. But I noticed a trend, and I wanted to kind of get your response to it. Some of the companies in New York are kind of saying, because I'm a costume designer, are saying that they're using like full costume rentals for productions as like like a green version of that. But I was curious, like, that usually involves like long distance travel for like a package of rentals to arrive, and that's certain implications for the environment, and then like dry cleaning. And I was curious kind of what you guys felt about renting costumes for a whole production.
Yeah, so this is where we get into the complexity. So, I mean, I think it's not to say, I think we've got to be really mindful of some of the assumptions that we might make about what's sustainable and what's not sustainable. Whether renting costumes, but it's coming from overseas, is actually a good a good thing. The other thing is, again, thinking about that social ecological is if we're renting costumes, we're also not employing costume designers potentially, costume makers, yeah. So I think that has to be interrogated a bit more because it's. I think it's great to recycle within your own community. Like, I think that's great, and I think you can. Particularly if you design for disassembly and you can take things apart and readapt them and reclaim them, right? So it doesn't have to be just one costume from one production coming in exactly as it's been done, especially if you have those networks and you have those connections and negotiations around that. But yeah, I think I would probably say it's, from a social ecological perspective, it's coming from afar, probably not the best solution. I think it would be much better to actually work within your own community and develop that, and actually have those rental resources within the own community. And employment of costume designers as well is something that I'm like, well, that's, all of this has to be considered. Is there anything that you wanted to say about that? Great. We can still work in a sustainable way and employ costume designers. It's probably, you know what I mean? Yeah.
We have a few hands down here. Oh, one there.
Hi, my name is James. I'm a student at the theater school at DePaul University in Chicago, US. I'm studying theater technology, so I'm not a designer. And so one thing I'm wondering is, how can we often find ourselves at like the mercy of designers sometimes, of like, hey, this is what I want. How do I get design? What's a way to push designers to think about ecology and conservation and sustainability in their designs from a technical standpoint?
Thank you so much. It's so exciting that you're asking this question from a technical theatre standpoint. Awesome, and I'm excited for you that you're going to start changing the system. But yeah, I think the thing is that obviously, I mean, something that Marianne talks about at Ecosceno as, I mean, you can speak to this about everybody having to be in the room, and I really hope that it's not you having to make the designer make those decisions, because really it's got to be everybody to do that. And I think it's quite, and there is still a hierarchy in the theatre world that is problematic, but it also means that that hierarchy can really be difficult for you to then, particularly as an emerging artist or emerging technician, theatre technician, to be able to say those things. And I think that I speak on behalf of a lot of students, maybe here in the room, or as someone who, when I first started out 10 years ago, I did not feel like I had the confidence to say, hey, we need to do things sustainably. And that is also something, because, you know, we're trying to change the system from within. And one of my key stories, which I always find really funny, is when I was at the production meeting for a big theatre company in Australia, and I still felt like it was the first time working with that company, and it was, you know, a big deal. And I said to them, can we work with reclaimed timber for this particular design element? And the technical director said to me, we can paint it to look like reclaimed timber. I was like, oh, okay, all right, we've missed the point here. Because sometimes I had to put it within like a notion of aesthetics, because I think that's often, as a designer, if you can kind of if you can say it's all about aesthetics, that's an easy way for people to go, oh, okay, this designer wants that thing. And so therefore, you know, that happens. But I think maybe, Marianne, you can talk about how you work with the whole community, because I think that's really important from a technical theatre perspective.
Yes, well, I've been in your situation, and it can be a bit heavy to carry, you know, the voice of ecoscenography within a production team where it's not yet, you know, a shared value. But I find that oftentimes having a good heart-to-heart conversation with the designers, with the team, is a good way to just have everyone getting excited about it, because, you know, it's a great practice. It's actually fun. So it's a good way to introduce it, but hopefully you eventually work with people who share the same value, because it is so much easier. And that's why before, we asked the question, so how can it be not too much pressure? Because if you're just by yourself carrying this, it can be heavy. Something that we do sometimes recommend, just to initiate a conversation within institutions, is to have on the production meeting order of the day list, just every time a ecoscenography, part at the end of the meeting, just to normalize a conversation and have a group production team conversation and just say, hey, so what about this? Anyone has any idea how to make this more sustainable? And it will normalize it, and eventually it will become more of a habit, and that's something that you have to, to fight for. So.
And I think find your team of eco-conscious collaborators, find that little network within your community of people who are on the same page as you and support one another, because we are so much better in numbers, in the sense that you will start to change it. You just get a couple of people with you on that journey, and it starts to change the system. So galvanize your ecoscenography community.
We have, okay.
Hello, my name is John, he, him. I am Canadian. I am an acting student primarily, partially coming into the more technical design sides of theater. I'm from the University of Saskatchewan in Saskatoon. My question is for both of you, but regarding funding for the theater. So where I come from in Saskatoon, most of theater funding comes from corporate funding, not so much from government. So my question is, if you also relate with government, with corporate funding more than government, do you ever have the conflict of where you're getting your funding in terms of like mega corporations or oil companies, things like that? Do you ever have a conflict with where your funding is coming from, is my question. And if so, how do you navigate that?
Do you want to talk about that? It's really interesting, because we're having, in the research lab that I'm in at the moment in Australia, we're working towards this transition in the Australian performing arts sector. And it's a real contention point, because Australia is financed a lot by mining and coal and oil. And so all of that stuff is very... a lot of theatre companies, we don't have a great funding support system in Australia for the arts, and so a lot of companies have to get by on that additional funding, but it is incredibly problematic. And I think there's a lot of theatre companies that are shying away from showcasing that they are actually doing sustainable work, because they know that they've got, Origin Energy on their, on their flyers, on their website. So it has to be considered, and I'm hoping that we can get to a point where it's a problem. It's something that has been being grappled with in the arts and culture community more broadly around the world, around art sponsorship. And the Tate Gallery, if anyone knows the work that's been happening at the Tate Gallery, is a really good example of that, because they've been protesting, and the Tate Gallery no longer has, as far as I know, those same sponsors. Do you want to talk about it from a funding context in Canada, though?
Yeah, well, different province, I guess, different system. I don't know. We haven't had this problem so much, because it's mostly public-funded, the theaters that we work with, and Ecoscenography's consultancy is also mostly from Art Council grants. But I know we've been looking for sponsors, and it was part of the conversation to be, they have to be coherent with what we do, because otherwise it's an easy way to use Ecoscenography as a greenwashing for the activities. So we've been very strict for trying to find sponsors that are coherent with our values, but haven't encountered so much the issue otherwise. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Kolja, and I'm a socks maker from Germany, and currently starting a new production. So I was very inspired by the 3 steps, and also a bit related to the question before with the funding about the post-production, because I don't know, probably everywhere, but funding, or no matter if private or public, usually focus on pre and production, but how do you deal with funding during the post-production? If you have experience or tips with that.
I do. This I know.
Yeah, go.
So part of the conversation that we're having with production directors is that the after has to be considered at the very beginning. It's actually the first step when we do ecoscenography. So it's like great to have this idea what's going to happen with it afterward. What that changes is that the repurposing of the materials is part of the budget, the main budget, and it's included really, so in the design budget. So we know that we're going to use this, it's going to be given to this organization, it's going to go back to the theater, and we have different strategies for that. So for instance, sometimes we see that a lot. So for a theater season, we'll be building almost 3, 4, 5 times the same a very similar set, but it's always kind of cheaply done. So sometimes it's about thinking with the institution, with the producer, can we put ahead of time a bigger part of building a budget to have something that's solid, standardized, reuse, and then you save budget on every single production of that year. So that's one strategy we do. Another strategy that we do put forward is the fact that landfill is not free. You have to pay tax, you have to pay a container, there is transportation. So bringing the sets to trash has a cost. It's just not in the same budgetary envelope, but it's there within the theater. So how can we have a conversation and bring that up before and use that budget for repurposing of materials? So a few insights, yeah.
Yeah, I think we have to relook at budgets, set budgets, for example, to go, okay, within that budget, we're also thinking about the circulation plan, see where we can save costs in other ways, especially if we're working within a sustainable framework. There are cost savings that we can make. Think about where you can partner with community, so partner with an organisation. A lot of my set designs have actually gone to schools. So I've already, the school actually has been quite handy. The school, we had a kind of portable stage that we made out of reclaimed timber. It was very beautiful. And we didn't have any storage space, which is often the case, as many of you would know, that storage is an issue. So we already from the get-go said we need a home for this space. It's one of those versatile things as well. And we started talking to the community about whether there might be a school that's interested and to have it for their drama classes, and then the 2 drama teachers came with a truck with a little kind of, just a little van, and picked up the set for us, which was amazing because we then didn't have to deal with how to get rid of the set because they picked it up. And as far as I know, it's still going for their drama productions at the moment. So there are those kind of ways in which you can go, well, we're thinking about it didn't actually cost us anything. If anything, it saved us money because they picked it up for us. Yeah.
It's true that oftentimes it doesn't add cost, like the Marie-Renée Bourgearvet example you showed, like the wood bridge. The company, they were thrilled to come back, to get back their barn woods, and they thought, well, the theory is insane. They're just giving this away. We just sold them to, that wood, it's a precious material. So they came back to the theater, they dismantled it themselves, and they made double the profit. So sometimes it's just this thinking ahead.
Yeah.
Will actually won't increase the budget for the repurposing, yeah.
I'm just hoping that, given what's happening in terms of the discussion around the circular economy more broadly, that this will just become part of the way in which theatre companies are working, that it's just integrated into the budgets, it's just integrated in the way that we do things. It's not that hard. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jimena. I'm from Mexico. I am a theater producer, and I thank you for sharing your experiences. We all recognize that this is an urgent problem, the climate change, and we would discover the magical answer, and there is no a magical solution. It's a step-by-step that you say. Thank you for mention the professional ethics and being consistent. And I think we need to be aware for the energy cost, that the amount of energy that require our lives, heat our homes, transportation, the food that we eat, and the energy cost that the construction and scenography takes, not only a new scenography with a new wood or a new metal or the different materials, also the energy cost, that the recovery materials, that it's also an energy cost. And ask for Marianne, do you have also estimate the energy cost of the works that you advise?
If I have a what, sorry?
An estimate of an energy cost in the place that your company advise.
Yeah. So with the postmortems that we do, in the big portrayal that I explained before, we do have a bit that's on the life cycle analysis of parts of the materials of the set, mostly wood and metals. And we do have the electricity of the lighting and the projector also taken into account. But you see, that's why we mentioned how context is so important, is that a production in my province with hydroelectricity, the real impact is really with the materials, whereas a different province of my country, Canada, might be opposite. So we do that, and we calculate the life cycle analysis, so how much energy and greenhouse gas has been emitted by the use of this and that material. But we also focus a lot on the strategies put forward and just circularity of material, because in our context, that's where the impact mostly lies.
My name's Cody. I'm a student and emerging designer at the University of Saskatchewan in Canada as well. And my question for you guys is, how can we approach lighting from an eco standpoint, and both in the like the equipment side as well as on the energy side? Is there a way that we can start saving energy cost through both equipment usage and through new equipment or reused equipment?
Yeah, so we've just started this year to work more with lighting ecoscenography. So again, depending on context, so in the context of where I'm at with hydroelectricity, it is better to reuse our equipment as much as possible before changing it, because there's more impact in the equipment itself. But in many other contexts, so coal, electricity, fuel electricity, all that, oftentimes it is better to go with LED equipment, so that will have a bigger impact, but you do need to make the calculation for that. And I know Jan Garrett is looking at me, he's the expert in the room for that, so maybe at the break, it's a good idea to go ask him some questions about it specifically for your context. But I know in your book you also mentioned this brilliant lighting designer who does minimalistic lighting, just to put...
I think there's so many different ways. I think it's a really untapped area, and there's been lots more research and done around set and costume design, but I think that lighting design and sound design has still got so much area to explore. The potential of using renewable technologies on stage, using kinetic energy, solar, bicycle-powered energy, all of that can be a point of innovation. You can actually make that part of the dramaturgy of the work as well, and I know Ian Garrett has worked a lot in that space. He's done lots of experimentation there. But there's also something to be said for lighting designers being being more minimalist in their choices about how you use lighting. I know that some of the most innovative lighting that I've seen is very subtle. It's not about big lights. It's actually much more about small-scale lighting interventions. So we can actually really celebrate that and enjoy the darkness as well that comes with theatre, and just being really mindful of, do we need all the lights? Do we need all the lights in the rigs? You know? That I think we just assume that we do. without actually thinking about what do I actually need. And that's a general question for any discipline of, of scenography is like, what do we need? What, rather than just taking it as a given that I've got the whole lighting rig. Yeah.
So
keep exploring. I'm really excited to see what's happening in the lighting space. There's one more question.
No,
I
that was
think
the
we've got
last question because we're almost at time. But at break, we'll be here if you have some questions for us. Quickly, just to end this first panel, Tanya, I want to say a big thank you for your book because it provides hope, it's inspiring. When I read it, it got me really excited about what we do and this approach toward the crisis that we're in. So I just was wondering, do you have any last word to share with us this morning on ecoscenography?
I think just one thing I want to say is that it's actually really fun. Because I think sometimes we think that it is hard work, it takes a lot to think about these things, but it can actually, if you look through that lens of abundance, think about thrivability, it becomes really fun because you connect with the community, with place, with materials in new ways, and I think it will change your life in a really good way in terms of taking that on board, but. Yeah, to me, it's always got to have fun. Otherwise, nobody's going to want to do it, right? Yeah. So hopefully the examples that you saw today from both of our presentations show you how beautiful it can be and how exciting. Yeah.
Thank you. And can you tell us where we can find more information on ecoscenography?
Great. So the Ecoscenography website is a knowledge exchange platform for PQ, and it's a free resource. It's just ecoscenography.com. You can go there, you can read a lot of different blog posts from other designers talking about their practice. There's a little bit of examples of people talking about this, bit of the theory, summary of the theory that's in my book that's freely accessible to everyone. We also have an Ecoscenography Facebook group, which has been going for a long time, I think almost 10 years, and it's got about 2,000 members in it, and it's always the really good place to start if you've got a question, to go there. And we have such a really beautiful eco-theatre community. They're the best people. Not that I'm biased, but they are it's like the best community to hang out with. So yeah, come and join us. And Marianne and I host a book club every few months where we look at a book that deals with ecological topics. Sometimes they're like text, well, what are they? They're like non-fiction and fiction. And it's a really informal kind of Zoom conversation where we all catch up and talk about a book. And it's a really great way to connect with other eco-minded scenographers. So again, free. So feel free to get in touch with all of those things.
And speaking of book, do you want to explain the guest book we have at the entrance quickly as an activity?
So we have a guest book. Where is the guest book? I think it's just there. Oh, yeah. We have a guest book because we want to we want to take a little snapshot of today and feel the eco-scenography community coming to life. And we're actually just asking you to, if you wanted to write your name and your country and a few comments about what eco-scenography means to you, what you gained out of today, what you want to hear about more, what you want to see more, because that's really helpful for us in terms of building the conversations and the research that we want to do in this space. And at the end of the day, we're going to look at the guest book and highlight some of the comments that were from today. So please take your time to write something in the guest book today. And my book is available in the library. Not the library, it's also available in some libraries, hopefully. But it's available in the PQ bookshop.
All right, thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Tanya. Thanks, everyone.